So hello everybody, welcome to this devotion on this Wednesday afternoon, and it just really is nice to be back. I see that obviously the C-Link has been fixed because YouVersion, or I beg your pardon, Facebook is working nicely now on Facebook Live. So if you get to see this live, I'm really glad, or if you see it recorded, delighted you could be with me today. So I'm posting a commentary, my comments on day 5 of John Mark Comer's YouVersion reading plan called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. You can get this reading plan for yourself. I highly recommend it. I think it'll have a tremendous impact on you. You just go onto the YouVersion Bible app and you search for John Mark Comer, or you search for The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and you take this 5-day reading plan. So I must give credit to him because he has kind of stimulated my thoughts about this whole idea of the ruthless elimination of hurry. In this particular day 5 of the reading plan, he speaks into the subject of the Sabbath. And this is something that I've always felt quite strongly about. And I'd love to just share some of my thoughts and his thoughts around the Sabbath, about how the relentlessness to believe that workaholicsm is some kind of virtue. And I just love the way that James Comer has given us some thoughts about how we can develop a kind of a mentality of the Sabbath, a heartfelt way to do Sabbath. So let me get stuck into it. In the first part of the commentary, Mark Comer basically says, the weight and the responsibility of work, that's part and parcel of life, and we can't escape that. And this is what he says, and I quote him. He says, what we need isn't an escape from the weight, but a way to carry it with ease and joy. That's what Jesus offers, a way to carry the weight of life with a straight back and a smile on your face. And I mean, that's so true, isn't it? Because we can have holidays and we can have days off, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we find rest for our souls, that we are restored and revived. And we can't eliminate all the problems. We can't get rid of every responsibility that we have. Life demands that we have responsibilities, and that produces a weight. And all of this kind of stems from this magnificent scripture in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30, where Jesus speaks about being burnt out, being washed up. And in the message version, it just reads so beautifully, and I'd like to read it to you today. Jesus says these words, are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? He says, come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. That's from Matthew 11, 28 to 30. And, oh man, it just fires me up, these words. He says, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. What Jesus is not saying is that you should not work. He says, walk with me and work with me. And it's not just work with him in terms of working with him, but do work with him. Watch how I do it. And so, we're living in a society, and it's amazing to me that we have a lot of information these days about fatigue, about burnout, and the kind of the symptoms around that, and then, of course, the consequences of, clinical depression, all that stuff. And it's part and parcel of my world and my life as well. And then there's this kind of social, what I call it, misfire, where people kind of will come to me when I've been away, and they'll brag, say, well, I haven't been on holiday for like 5 years. I haven't taken a break. I work 18 hours a day. And honestly, when people say that to me, I often think to myself, our society we shouldn't applaud that. We shouldn't think that it's some kind of virtue. Actually, you know what? It's not very smart. I don't think it's smart to have never taken a holiday. People, well, I don't have the money and all that. Now, I understand that there are some limitations, but most of us get leave, and we can take leave in some way that doesn't necessarily have to cost money. But the point I'm making is that within the context of hard work, there has to be a place where we can restore, a place where we can find our souls around these things. And that's why this whole idea of Sabbath is one of my favorite subjects. And I'm not talking in a legalistic way that it has to be on a certain day at a certain time. I'm talking about the fact that when Jesus says that he is the Lord of the Sabbath, that he is the one who brings rest. And that we should find ways in which we can kind of integrate rest and restfulness and working from a restful place into our hearts, into our lives, and the way in which we conduct our lives. And this is a lot easier said than done, but nevertheless, it's something worth talking about. I think sometimes when people tell me that they've never taken a holiday or they work so hard and all this kind of stuff, sometimes, and I know in my own case, this has been the case where you kind of are actually speaking to a deeper wound. Sometimes we try to prove ourselves and our value and our worth by our hard work, but so often it's a control issue. It's a control issue about fear, trying to make certain our future. So if we just work a little harder and go a little longer. Often I've heard young people say, young family fathers and mothers say, no, we need to work harder so we can make a provision for our children. And there's truth to all of that. You can't just be dismissive of it, but we have to find the balance of rest and work in these kind of things. And so for me, sometimes it's been a fear issue, I think, that I can't delegate and I want to control. And so I find that I kind of can have in the past kind of worked sometimes more than what I've necessarily needed to work. So I do. I mean, there's certainly odd times, let's face it, when we need to burn the midnight oil. There are going to be seasons in our lives. But the underlying message, I think, what John Mark Comer is saying, and certainly what I'm saying today, is that if we can find rhythms of rest and recovery, that we can learn to work from a rested place. I know even in our church a few years ago, I became quite disturbed at the number of people that were perpetually fatigued and just always tired. And so we kind of try to find ways to provide more holiday time for them, more restful time, so they can learn to work from a rested place. And really, it's a learned behavior. It doesn't always come naturally to us. So I think as I looked at this, what John Mark Comer was talking about, it reminded me of the fact that when we work from a rested place, there's so many more benefits. We'll make less mistakes in our work. We won't have to repeat stuff and do it over and over again. We're more likely to be creative. And if business is not our goal, we will find better efficiencies, and efficiencies will become our goal if we kind of are working from that rested place. So it's a massive incentive. It's not easy, I know, but John Mark Comer in this devotion I read, he gives a really, really good tip about how we can perhaps change our heart and our mind around it. And I want to read what he says. He says, look for little Sabbath moments today. In your day, look for little Sabbath moments. When you first wake up, or you take a lunch break, or before a meeting, etc. When those opportunities come, forgo the urge to reach for your phone. Instead of reach out in your mind for God and settle into His rest. It's a kind of a pause, isn't it? That's what I think he's saying. That in these moments of the day, that between maybe going from one part of your work to another part of work, or going to lunch, or whatever it is, kind of just exhale and just kind of, you know what I mean? Let it out, breathe. I know that some people have these apps on their phone that remind them to breathe, and actually helps them to breathe. And I think those are the kind of things that if we can build it into our lives. And of course, in my opinion, to take a day of rest every week or so, it is vital to the process. Certainly when we think about this whole thing of Sabbath, when it was introduced into Jewish tradition, to the Jewish way of living, at the time the nations, they would be working like we are just to survive. And God comes and He actually gives them a command to take a rest, to be at rest. And it was such a kind of a departure from the social order of the day. Today, in our modern world, most of us, we do have a day off or some kind of rest. And it's how we use that rest to kind of let our souls recover, our hearts recover, our minds recover. Hey, you know what? I really am amped up about this. So he gives us what he calls a reading question in this devotion, and it goes like this. How is tiredness affecting my experience of Jesus' kingdom? How can I move towards Sabbath as both a weekly practice and a way of life? Let me say that again. How is tiredness affecting my experience of Jesus' kingdom? How can I move towards Sabbath as both a weekly practice and a way of life? I think that's a great question. It's a great summary to what we're trying to communicate here today. So my prayer for you, even as you watch this clip on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you're watching it, my prayer is that, you know what, that you would find moments to recover, to rest. Hope this means something to you. If it does, why don't you like it? And And I think that you can maybe share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, like me, all that kind of stuff that we are trying to get something on social media traction. So love your help for this. Thank you. Cheers. Okay.